birthday or a special occasion, then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, dublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way!
Dyslexic, the silent different. Sandra here from the UK, the community person working for A1 Tribe. The book was written to support people that have a very low understanding of dyslexia. If you're struggling and not understanding why your literacy skills are poor and what steps you can take to get people to help you and to improve for yourself, handle the emotional sides of not being able to read well, it's worth getting hold of the book, and maybe some of the information in it can support you. It's available now on amazon.co.uk or amazon.com. Check it out. It's called Dyslexic, the Silent Difference. Peace and love. Sandra.
Skunkworks Digital, a digital marketing agency that designs high quality websites and email marketing campaigns. Need help? We can update and maintain your current website. Your website is an extension of your business. From large to small, we're here to help. Contact us on www.skunkworks.dev. Skunkworks Digital, the new breed of agency for the digital era.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life chat like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, I'm a World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Well, I want to say a big good evening going out to each and every single one of you. My name is Kervin, Julien. I'm your host on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
I'm not proud of what
you can catch us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can get us live on YouTube. You can get us live on Facebook. You can get us live on Twitter.
Since I've gotten older.
And you can get us live on various social media platforms right across the world.
So numb, I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump.
We are a show that looks into the issues that are pertaining to the infringement of our basic and civil human rights.
A real alligator, especially all you hate.
Mainly centering around police brutality, killed by cops,
now he could be
wrongful convictions,
in prison.
constant recriminalization.
Already did my time.
Innocent individuals.
Already did my time.
Today we have the continuation of part 2 of community accountability. A debate we started last week with our roundtable team of Jerry Summers, Scott Russian, Patrick Lane, Stephanie Babb, Yolanda McNear, and D. Martin.
I paid for my
Co-hosted by my very own producer assistant, TJ Therese Gallagher.
Track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again.
And we're going to kind of look to pick up where we left off last week.
Statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet.
I don't know if you remember correctly, last week we were riding on the back of Nate Cole. That's the National Association. You know the one.
Game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
That's right, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Just needed to make sure that I got that right.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply.
So we were just looking at how some of these organizations who are on good pay,
I had to
funded,
I must admit, I was doing all
set up in order to
now sit back.
support the community or people that are being
The life I used to live, I wouldn't
impacted
I was young
by
and
improper use of law enforcement protocol.
was gum, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common.
And to be honest,
And they're much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
we weren't too impressed.
You out like a real alligator, especially all you.
So we're just going to touch up and round up on those some of those points that we had from last week,
Already did my time.
and then move on to the second segment of that community accountability,
Already did my time.
which is the psychological impact
On right now, he could be
that this loss
in
has on those that are left behind.
prison.
Wow, 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 wow. Trying to cope with
So hopefully we're going to be sharing some stats and figures and some genuine conversation.
trying to
And hopefully by the end of the time that we finished after this 2-hour show, we're going to have a better understanding as how people who go through this situation cope, how it affects them,
living hell.
what help might be available, if any at all,
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
and what you can do,
I
and
follow
who you can turn to
how
if you find yourself in this same predicament.
kingdom come. Thy will be done.
So please stand by
It's in heaven.
as we prepare for another live discussion
Daily bread.
with me, your friendly host, Kervin, Julien,
Trust me.
on Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio. Hang tight.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power.
Looks like we're coming across fine on all social media platforms.
Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime.
And I know Dee's going to come on here and blame me for why she's so tired because I kept her up till the early hours of the morning. UK time, actually.
It ain't about
3 o'clock in the morning, we were still jamming right here in the UK. Across the pond to the USA.
let him cast the
And
first.
our friends over in the Caribbean. Maybe this is not the time to talk about it, but hey.
So I can get my life on track.
When we're talking about
Live like
some
a
of the glum
citizen again. This is my message
circumstances that we find ourselves in around the world, I
worldwide.
think it's good that we can find something positive to talk about,
Stop stabbing.
to look forward to lean on.
Yeah.
So for those of you that weren't there, we partied from 12 midnight UK time till 3 a.m. right here. That's right. Hang tight. Our roundtable team coming up next. First, I want to say big shout-outs going out to Sarah Benjamin, Susanna Lopez, Dee Rushton, Savannah Ledsome, Steve, Dr. P, Christina, Lee Rose, and several others who are watching live as we speak. So if you are following us, you can find us once again live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can find us live on the World Jam Global Radio YouTube account. You can also find us live on Twitter. You can find us live on Facebook. And you can also find us live on it's a gaming site actually called Twitch. We're streaming live there too. Streaming on multi-platform streams right across the world. And this is an internet-based radio station. And we deal with issues pertaining to the breach of your human and civil rights. So, again, I was just saying, we've got our roundtable team of Jerry Summers, Scott Russian, Patrick Lane, Yolanda McNair, Stephanie Babber, Dee Martin, supported by our assistant producer, Therese Gallagher, TJ to her friends. And I'm going to take this opportunity to just share from where we're coming from the UK at the minute. It was 917 deaths reported in the last 24 hours pertaining to the coronavirus pandemic. And we're now very close, just over 9,300 odd, I think, deaths we've had in the UK now. And they're predicting that by the time that this Easter weekend is over, we would have surpassed 10,000 deaths. And in fact, our total of 980 across the whole of the UK is even higher than either Spain or Italy in any of their worst days. And I think we only fall behind New York at the minute as far as the number of deaths in a 24-hour period is concerned. And they're claiming that we haven't hit the peak yet. So only God knows what's left to come. All I can say is that we'll continue to pray for our friends, our loved ones, and those that we know, because this thing does not discriminate. It doesn't look for color, class, or creed. It doesn't care if you're white, black, pink, or brown. It doesn't care if you're tall, short, fat, or slim. It doesn't care if you've got long hair, short hair, or no hair at all. This virus does not discriminate. And all I can say is please continue to keep safe. Follow the protocols that have been put down there for your own well-being. And let's just come through this in the best way that we possibly can. I'm going to slip across to the United States of America to my roundtable team now. And as we introduce them one by one, we'll allow them to update you as to how coronavirus is impacting their particular locality. And I'll go first and foremost. I'll go to our beloved Pops himself, Mr. Jerry Summers.
Good morning or good evening, depending where you're at, and what an honor it is to be here. Idaho is remaining constant. We're a small rural state. We've got 1.7 million in population. We've seen a jump in the number of cases to 1,396 as of today, with 24 confirmed deaths, which is double the last time we talked. We had, I believe, 12 last Saturday, and that's doubled to 24. Not huge numbers, but again, we're a very rural state.
Okay. And how are you as a family coping, Jerry?
We're doing fine. We're self-isolating. We got notification that somebody we knew very closely had the virus, but I guess they've come through that, so there's no concern about our family at this point. We're just doing fine and getting stuff done around the house that's been needed to be done for quite a bit of time.
You know, we were just talking before we went on. We came online. I mean, I lost a cousin yesterday, and for me, it wasn't. Yes, you know, you kind of stopped for a minute and thought, wow, it's coming really close to home and becoming a lot more personal than just watching it on the news or on TV now. But I think the biggest problem that I had with it all, we were all talking as a family. We've got a massive family WhatsApp group. I am part of a very large St. Lucian Caribbean family, and we have a WhatsApp family group. And on that family group, the conversations that were taking place, and you can see people crying out in that group simply because that they weren't able to support one another in a more, you know, if you know anything about West Indian and black families, you know, next to birthdays and weddings, a death is a big. I mean, it's a big thing anywhere. But everybody comes together. There's a big wake, but the house is full. People are coming around for days, and sometimes it can go on for a week or so, right up until the funeral. It's a massive thing in our culture and in our community. But not being able to go round and support, offer your condolences, give a hug or whatever, I think was the biggest outcry I saw in all of that, was that people were just so much struggling with the fact that they couldn't do what they would normally do in this situation, which was come together and support one another. And I think that's the biggest stumbling block for me in all of this, because people will come and go. They will, there's only two things that we're sure of. One, we're going to be born, and the other one is that we're going to die. It's going to happen. It's an inevitability. It's going to happen. But normally when that happens, that people come around the family and support the family. And even as we're talking about, our human rights and, our civil rights and law enforcement and killed by cops, even those wrong things that are done when our children are killed by cops, we still have people that come round us, come to us, come and be about us. And, people will come to the house and say, look, you just sit down a minute, I'll tidy up, whatever it is, whatever support that's needed, that can be done. And it doesn't bring your loved one back to life, but, it's a helping hand that's available. I think people are just feeling lost, that they can't do anything at all. And in fact, when people are dying in hospital, they can't even go and visit them. And I think that's the real stumbling block for most people. So I just pray that it's something that doesn't get any closer than it already is. But I'm just praying for all of these families that are really struggling to get around this at the minute, especially those that are losing loved ones and are unable to even go and visit them in the mortuaries or in the hospitals, and etc. I think that's the biggest one for me.
It's the isolation where it's horrendous.
Yeah. Let's quickly move on to Mr. Paul. Paul. It's Scott Rushing. It's because he's using his wife's Skype. That's why. And I keep looking at the name on the list. But it's Scott Rushing, Mr. Scott Rushing. How are we doing, sir? And how is coronavirus doing in your locality?
Good evening, wherever you are, and good morning out here in California. The area I live in, it's called Ventura County. It's between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. If most people in the world know Santa Barbara and LA, so we're in the middle, and about 800,000 in population. And when I checked yesterday, there's been less than 300 people that are currently being treated. There's been a number of people that have been, I guess, diagnosed with the symptoms, but not being treated. And I believe there's been 6 or 7 deaths. So it's statistically that's a pretty small amount, but the fear is what I've noticed. The fear that particularly elderly people have, like being Easter, weekend and tomorrow, an important day to Christians all over the world. Yeah. They can't go to church, and most important day in their year, really even above Christmas, is it's the fear though, the fear factor. You don't want to get it, you don't want to spread it, and it's the confusion of all of that I think is it's disturbing and concerning. And when we go to the store, everybody's got the masks and the gloves on, and it's very surreal. That's my observation.
Yeah. I'm going to skip across to Mr. Lane, Mr. Patrick Lane. How are we doing, sir?
I'm sorry.
Did I catch
I'm doing great.
Did I catch him hopping?
No.
How is coronavirus
me.
doing in your locality, sir?
We have 11,166 confirmed cases of coronavirus. We have 50 deaths here in Kansas. In my city of Lawrence, Kansas, which is a big college town of about 100,000 people, I went to the grocery store a couple of days ago after getting off of work. And for the first time that I've been to the grocery store, everyone inside had at least a mask on. Many had the latex gloves and the mask. But people here are taking it seriously. And I think that, as you guys have said before, it's this being isolated from family members and people that you normally have contact with that is affecting people so greatly. My fear is this, is that here in Kansas, we had a governor who issued a stay-at-home order specifically directed at churches as far as their congregations on Easter. Legislators here, Republican legislators here in Kansas, came together to block that. It is now being debated in the Kansas State Supreme Court of whether the churches will be liable for those gatherings on Easter. My problem is this: is that we have, as you said, a virus that doesn't care. It doesn't care about any of our politics, but yet we still have people who are trying to politicize this virus. And I think that is going to ultimately cost people their health and possibly their lives. So we're watchful. We're doing pretty good here in Kansas, but we know that this thing is going to move in waves. So people need to not be lulled into a false sense of security is how I feel about it.
Yeah. I was just looking at as of Friday just gone, in my particular locality, although we've got 9,300 odd deaths around the entire United Kingdom, in my particular area, and I can't give you the stats of what our population is in this area. As of Tuesday, the confirmed cases in the Midlands, which is the borough that covers me, is over 7,806, with over 212 deaths already here in this very small locality, with over 786 new confirmed cases almost every day, is what they're saying at the moment. So, yeah, it's a huge thing, and again, as we've already said, it's taking no prisoners and it doesn't discriminate. But thank you for that update, Patrick. Let's move on to Yolanda McNair. How are we doing, Yolanda?
Hey, I'm hanging in there.
And hanging in there is what you really mean, right?
Right, just barely hanging on.
Okay.
But yeah, I had it. The scare come close to my family. One of my cousins. Luckily, she's doing better at home, recovering. And I literally was at the grocery store this morning with the mask and the gloves on. And I do it more so because I know that I've worked all night, so my immune system is not at 100%. So keep everybody, whether they are a carrier, because there's a lot of us that are carriers that are not symptomatic or even having an issue with it. Our body is dealing with it and keeping it moving, just to protect everybody around. Yeah. Looking at the information on the internet, Michigan has 22,783 confirmed cases. We have 1,281 deaths, and yesterday 208 people died, which is the largest number to pass away from this virus thus far. One of our main event centers has been transformed into a makeshift hospital for people who have had it and are improving. And that's what they're doing here. As far as the separation of church and state, they don't seem to understand what that means. Yeah. And
our churches are closed here in the UK. All of our churches are closed.
Yeah, most of the churches here, I mean, they are as well. It's just you have those certain pastors who have forgot that they're a pastor and not a God. Yeah. And they think that they can tell you what a virus is going to do. Yeah. Like that clown down in Florida who's cost people lives, but you can't believe so much in your pastor that you abandon common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We get that. But yeah.
Because he doesn't have a direct phone line, the guy. Because if he did, I'm pretty sure he'd be on it right now, asking them, okay, what's the next move, or what the virus? I mean, what's the cure look like, so I can get down on putting some money on that and helping, quote unquote, my church.
Sometimes, I'm a born again Christian, and I love my God, but churches and ministers and pastors sometimes they're the worst of enemies to Christianity. They don't help.
Right, and I'm not anti anything, but it's just a fact.
But just remember, it's only some, not all. It's only some.
Right. And I look at everything like that. There's no absolute 100% of anything. So I'm just taking it one day at a time and doing my best to keep my family safe. And my family is like yours. We like to get together all the time.
I hear you.
And we have those that are in town, and like you just had a video chat or text or whatever, because nobody can get together like we normally would.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, thanks for that update, Yolanda. Let's move on very quickly to Stephanie Babb. How are we doing, Stephanie, and how is coronavirus doing in your locality?
Hi. Actually, Oregon has not been hit as bad as a lot of places. I think we've had somewhere around 44 deaths in Oregon, and there's only been about 4 reported cases in Lane County. But that's saying that's reported having been tested, because nobody's getting tested. So you don't really know if that's the case or not. But the hardest hit here there's a large houseless community around here, and what they're saying they're trying to do and what they're actually doing is missing the mark, and those are the people that I'm really feeling for right now, because that's a big deal, and it just puts everybody at a greater risk. And so that's why we wear the masks and stay inside. If anything, I work in a doctor's office, so I want to make sure that I don't pass it on to anybody that could be vulnerable.
Okay, so thank you very much for that update. And finally, let's just slip across to little sis, Dee Martin, who can't be doing that bad because she was up with me till 3 o'clock this morning, partying the night away. Oh, sorry, did I let that out of the hat? Hi, Dee.
Hey, good morning. And it's good you mentioned that too. But initially, Kervin, it is always important to, since the media has spread this mass hysteria, everybody's freaking out. So you hear, there's the message that says, hey, freak out, but calm down at the same time. And 9 times out of 10, what do? We freak out and go buy everything and not considering the next person. So it is important to also bring up, what the positive side of what has happened. There's a lot of things that we have laxed on in our day-to-day lives that now we can refocus on. Yeah. So it definitely is important. We did have a blast last night, and I will definitely do it again, quarantine or not. Yeah. But it's definitely, it is hitting hard here in Sacramento, and you know how I feel about the numbers, but as of right now, what Sacramento is saying is that they have about 653 cases, 0 recoveries, 24 deaths, reported deaths at this time. And I say I'm always a bit shaky on the numbers because there's been some people that I've personally spoken with, not anyone directly in my family that has been affected, and thank God for that. But what a friend shared with me is that a relative of his passed away, and it was reported to document the death as a COVID-19 victim, in which that wasn't true. So I'm not sure, whether these numbers are reported accurately, or why is the motive, if this had nothing to do at all with COVID-19, but they've been initiated to report those deaths as such. So that's a funny thing to me. I don't know why that is. definitely the family is definitely looking into it. But that's what's happening. So I'm always, on the edge with the numbers. Again, I don't know what's true and what's not true. So I kind of, and the people out here, as far as I'm concerned, we have like a 40% of individuals that are taking the social distancing, with the highest consideration, and other people that are not. So I see individuals with no gloves, no mask, and they're out in the shopping areas to late at night. And then some people I go and I see with their mask and their gloves and things of that nature. But what I wanted to kind of go over too is, I know there's a ton of people that are making at home the mask, which is great. It's so great. But then we also have to be aware of whether we're making them for nothing or not, because material has certain penetrations while others don't. So while we're understanding that we're covering, our facial area, some of these fabrics can prevent such germs or transformation of the COVID, and some cannot. So while you're looking cute, you may not be safe. Yeah. So we definitely need to understand that. And it's not all about making a buck. If we're going to make a buck, we can do it another way. Yeah. But to provide safety for the next time, and that's important too.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that update, Dee. I was just going to see if, because our beloved TJ, our assistant producer, has not been feeling too well. She's had a painkiller, and she didn't really want to talk much, but I'm not sure if she wants to update on how coronavirus is affecting her locality. Did you want to, TJ? Or you?
Sure, I'll yeah, yes. Utah's confirmed at 2,200. The deaths are 17. There's no recoveries yet to be noted.
Wow. Okay.
It's just a really, really tragic thing. We're pretty isolated too up here by Idaho, but I think we have more people than Jerry Summers.
Yeah. Let me just say this before we move on. 2 points of, so yesterday we had a 99-year-old man who had been hospitalized for over 3 weeks with COVID-19, who pulled through and was sent home. And he was sent home, he was given a guard of honor on his way out. This is a man who fought in the First World War, was held a prisoner of war for 3 years in Stalag, and eventually was liberated from that. So 3 weeks, probably nothing on 3 years, but at 99 years, where people are saying that the old and the frail are those that are most likely to be more impacted and die and not able to recover. It was a huge, positive, uplifting story when this 99-year-old man came through it, fought it, and was released home. And then when they brought him into where he lives in this cul-de-sac, the nurses had him in a wheelchair, and they had to wheel him round the block while everybody stood on their doorstep, just clapping him for the fact that he was able to pull through this and come out the other side. And his grandson was on the news this morning saying that was their granddad had always been their hero. He was a private man, but he lived the war. He done his things, always had good morals and principles and etc. But just to see the love that was shown for a man who
wow.
at 99 years of age was able to pull through it and come the other side.
What a wonderful story.
Absolutely. And secondly, another thing that we've been doing, and we've done it here in the UK for the last 3 weeks now, on Thursday at 8 o'clock, the entire country comes to a standstill, and all you can hear, no matter where you are, is the sound of clapping, shouting, and horns blowing as everybody in the country salutes our first responders, our national health workers, the hospital doctors, and all those that are working on the front line, the key workers, the essential workers that are keeping people alive and keeping the country running. At 8 o'clock, every Thursday for the last 3 weeks, they've done that. And we've seen pictures of, hundreds of police vehicles pulling up outside hospitals with their sirens flashing, their horns going, just to salute the hospital staff that are putting their own lives on the line at risk in order to try and get people through this and nurse people through this in all the various hospitals up and down the country. And I suppose you have to witness it and experience it to really understand what it's like. What one particular nurse said, 3 weeks running, she's left work in absolute tears, just seeing the love that's been poured out for her and her colleagues for something that they just get paid to do, you know, but seems to be so much more significantly important in this precise moment in time because of this invisible enemy that we're all trying to fight. So there's 2 positive stories that we've had here out of the UK, which I think is really uplifting for everybody. And there's all sorts of initiatives that are now taking place. We've got organizations and companies that are delivering food to doctors' homes for their families because some of these doctors can't get home. They're not allowed to leave the hospital in case they carry the virus with them. So organizations, even the Formula One director, owner, has actually set up a complete network of logistical distribution firms to deliver food to all the National Health Service workers who are working to their homes so that they've got food, meals, and all that sort of stuff to keep them going while they continue to battle. There's some real positive stories coming out of this. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's amazing how people can just find ways of pulling together in some of the most darkest of days, in some of the most bleakest of times, and some of the most difficult of circumstances that we go through. People just have this resolve to want to try and pull together and do something for someone else. And that's a good news story, and that needs to be reported more, I think. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you guys because we don't hear much about the differences or the impact of the infrastructure in America. With Trump basically trumping everything that anybody else suggests if he hasn't suggested it for himself. And I will add one more thing before we move on swiftly. I've not been part of the conspiracy theory or the propaganda whatsoever. But this thought did cross my mind the other day. The only person that might really benefit from all of this is Donald Trump, because it's going to be very difficult to vote in a new president or vote for a new president in the midst of all of this chaos and confusion that's going on, because people are going to just want some sort of stability to come out of the other side of this. And I think if anybody gets a mile out of this, it's going to be him, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately. Maybe I'll just get Patrick to comment on that, on the political front of that. Patrick, what do you think?
I think I love the stories that you just shared, because I think it's very important. And I think that quite possibly we're all seeing some of these positives that are coming out of something that has the potential to be so calamitous and is so calamitous. I think that the rat race that we all participate in has largely convinced us that we are all islands unto ourselves with very few points of connectivity to others. But this coronavirus has brought people together in a way that I have not noticed before. And now
so before you carry on, what the enemy means for harm, God will use for His good, right?
Absolutely, I absolutely. I heard a person say decades ago, and what they said is, God often allows the things He hates to bring about the things He loves.
Amen.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I see so many things coming out of this. In fact, I have conversations now with people at gas pumps and different places as we're out doing the essential things that we have to do. That without coronavirus, these conversations would have never happened. Yeah. So there are some positives to come out of this, and really that positive, I believe, is us recognizing the humanity in one another once again in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. So
absolutely, things have happened over the years where you've seen people drawn together in almost like a unilateral coming together to fight something. Nelson Mandela being in prison, and the fight to free him was one of those things that you saw worldwide coming together. People, all over the world standing for that. There are times when things like this happen. It just brings people together rather than separates them. And I really see that coming as you've just said there, Patrick. So thank you very much for that. Now, we've spent a long time trying to update you on the coronavirus as it is around the localities of our guests that we've got on the show today. But we do need to move on to the subject matter of what the purpose of this particular show is about, which is the community accountability. And if you remember correctly, last week we spoke about the backlash on the Nicole. That was the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And again, I commend Liana Perez for her attending the show the week before that and sharing the work that she does and what that organization does. So in no way, mean or form, am I trying to belittle her or gun her down or in any way. Scott Russian pointed out quite correctly that that's not what they're set up for. Although, I can't see why they can't extend their tentacles into the things that really matter. But for me, if you're setting up something, it really needs to have a real purpose and a real aim, and it needs to have some teeth. And I'm still struggling to see where those teeth are, and that's just my opinion. So please forgive me if anybody disagrees with me. But that's where I'm at with it. But in looking at that, we wanted to talk about, before we moved on to the second segment of what we wanted to do with this community accountability, we just wanted to brush up on what our thoughts were as to what we rounded up last week. And again, I'm just going to go to Jerry first, if I can, just for him to summarize what all last week was about and what he took away from that.
The main thing I took away from our discussion last week is that there is a definite need to have citizens oversight committees that have some teeth in them. And NACOL is a good organization. It has started to bring things in front of citizens, the need for oversight. I think they lack the teeth that I would like to see them have. And I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Mr. Rushing as he talks about the situation in Oakland. He's done some research. He sent it to me, and I've actually read all the policies that they have, and I think that is the right structure. It's going to be difficult to get going through all the police unions and that type of thing, but it's the structure that needs to be done, and I think he can speak to that since he's talked to Rashida more than I've never talked to her, but since he's talked to Rashida, I think he's going to have a greater and deeper insight into that type of coalition. And I'd just like to yield my time to him because I think he's got some valuable things to say.
Well, there you go. Jerry Summers, as Jerry Summers steps aside, in steps Mr. Scott Russian, who was really the instigator and initiator of the previous week's show on the call anyway, because he was the one that wanted to have it on here. So I'm hoping that it's really opened up his eyes and put some drive and purpose into him, and he's going to share with us what his findings were and what he took out of the last 2 weeks in particular, especially when it comes down to community accountability. Come on in, Scott.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Everyone? Thanks, Jerry. And yes, the talk with Liana, I think what it did for me and maybe for the Roundtable members is to kind of open our eyes, not that we, weren't aware, but the lack of, I guess, civilian involvement in policing across this country. A couple things first of all, the title of this show is like the emotional effects of losing a loved one, or today. And to people listening, for me, one of the things that I've done to channel my grief and my anger is to look at civilian, oversight of law enforcement. It's too late to bring back my son, my friend David Phillips, his son Desmond, who was killed by some of the same officers who killed my son just 14 weeks apart. And all my friends, and I probably talked to a dozen besides our group, family members that have lost loved ones, and the anger and the grief just doesn't end. And the lack of of inability, that helplessness of doing anything, got me funneled into civilian oversight, because we might save lives in the future. So that's been my emotional. And instead of just like worrying about it, as Jerry said, I've reached out to people that have made changes in their communities. And I think I've sent to the Roundtable and others, my Facebook friends, what I've learned in Oakland, California, how a mom who lost her husband and her son in an officer-involved shooting on a call on a dog complaint in their home. This lady, Rashida Grenage is her name, and she got a call. She was a teacher. She got a call from the police department or coroner that she needs to come home because her teenage son and her husband have been killed by police officers. And she's in the classroom. If you can imagine that, and I think we all can, because we all got that call or that visit, all of us in the Roundtable, that we've lost a loved one to an officer-involved shooting. And it's just like being hit by lightning. It just takes the wind out of you. It just, you guys all know what I'm saying. You just go numb. After I got over the numbness, I got into action. And as Jerry said, and I've been bringing Jerry into this because he does bring the professional. I'm a salesman. I've been a real estate broker my whole life, so I had a hard learning curve. But Jerry's an excellent resource, and I did read his recent book, Tarnishing the Badge, which is a good read. And I think what Jerry's trying to do and what I've been trying to do is not only complain about the lack of civilian oversight, which is how I got in touch with Nicole and Leanna, but to do something about it. And I looked at the Nicole model, and I saw the weaknesses. And Kervin, I don't know how you do it, but you were spot on in pointing out the weakness of an organization like NACAL, of just not having enough teeth in it, accountability for the officers and how they're approaching in more of a, I would say, dainty way, to lack of a better word. And I'm angry. I want action. I don't want daintiness. I want action. And as you all do. So this woman, Rashida, and I have spoken, and I sent to you some of her articles. She got into action. She got a law passed in the city of Oakland. It's called Measure LL. And she got the voters of Oakland to give the power to a coalition of civilians to hire and fire the police chief. And they did. They recently fired this woman who the committee of civilians felt was not making the changes within the department. And that's amazing to me. And that's the kind of teeth that, and Jerry and I have talked about it, the model is out there. And if we can be a catalyst for getting the word through this program, through our friends, through our letter writing, through our experiences, if we can be the catalyst to start creating in our communities a coalition for police accountability with civilians having the authority to hire and fire a police chief, that will change things. Because if a chief, like you said, Kervin, you just nailed it. If the coach of the football team is, not doing his job, the team keeps losing, you don't fire the team, you fire the coach. Yeah. And you just nailed that. It's an excellent example. So over this last week, and I'm sorry if I'm bombing all my Roundtable people with my research, but I really want your opinion, and I wanted to let you know, and any listeners know, that there are models for families, particularly like us, that have had lost loved ones unnecessarily in officer-involved shootings. There's something we can do. And this little lady, Rashida, she proved it. And she did it. And that's my goal. So Nicole has got its role. There's other organizations, what they call PCABs, Police Civilian Advisory Boards, PCABs. They're totally ineffective, in my opinion. The only thing that will work is for civilians to have oversight over the chief, the leaders. Once they start losing their jobs, then you'll see action from the top down. in the culture, and that's my goal. So I'll yield my time back to the group.
Thank you very much for that update.
Well, Scott, I have a quick question for Scott. Has there been any pushback against that civilian review board in Oakland?
The short answer is yes. It's not. Maybe I'm making it sound like it was just easy to do, but there were. The short answer is tremendous pushback from the police officers union, from not only in Oakland, which is a large department, thousands of officers. They, of course, lobbied, complained, threatened lawsuits. At this time, they don't have any lawsuits against them, but they probably will and probably have. So, yes, it's a political and a legal obstacle course, Patrick, to get through. But, everything is, as you know, and you'd agree, anything worthwhile is going to be tough to create and do. But, that's, yes, it wasn't easy, but the city of Oakland, I guess the key to it, the answer to your question is what Rashida told me and what I've heard from the families across the country is there's usually groups like Justice for Travis, Justice for Taylor, Justice for my son, Justice for Desmond Phillips. If we can pull all these different groups together, that's the part of the coalition that will go to the authority, whether it's the city council, board of supervisors, in that community, and create the legislation to give that kind of accountability to hire or fire a chief to civilians. So it can be done. It has been done. It wasn't easy. It took her years to do that, and it's always still subject to being legal. But Patrick, it's legal, it's enforceable, and this recent firing of this woman who was just only been the chief like 2 years is a clear indication that this civilian coalition has the bite that Jerry mentioned, has the bite. But it's a struggle. It's an ongoing struggle. But that coalition is committed, and just like we're committed.
Let me just throw this. I'm sorry, guys. We're kind of. It sounds like we're stuck in the same place at the minute, but we're not. So I think we're really getting somewhere. I just want to bring Jerry back in a minute. What are the stumbling blocks? What would the chiefs put in the way as opposition to stop overseers from having that sort of I wouldn't say power, but or even authority, but jurisdiction over the way that they governed their particular forces in their localities?
Briefly, probably the biggest point is that it's the chief's responsibility to take care of the organization, not a citizens group that isn't familiar with police procedures and protocol. The problem with that is police chiefs for years have not been doing that, and we have a systemic problem. So that's the first thing. Then you're going to have in larger cities, you're going to have any type of police union. In Idaho, it'd be the Fraternal Order of Police. In other organizations like maybe LAPD, it's going to be the police union. Boise will be the police union, are all going to object to any type of civilian oversight over what they do, because that affects that thin blue line in the wall of silence.
Because you see, the way that you guys operate your structure, it's so different that the chiefs, the sheriffs, it depends on who they've got in their pockets or who they've got on their sides, determine how long they stay in their positions for. Whereas over here, for example, in the UK and in many other countries, they have a different model where these chiefs, these people that are appointed, are accountable to another body who oversees what they do. They've got to report back, and they need stats, figures, success ratios and models that they and for me, to put something in place that has teeth, it has to be something that can force the chief to take note. And at the minute, there doesn't seem to be anything that forces a chief to take note. Am I wrong in my thinking, or that's no. You, Jerry?
No, you're absolutely correct. the way the structure is supposed to work, sheriffs are elected by the citizenry of the community, so they're responsible to the citizenry, although their board of commissioners, county commissioners, is the one that controls the finances. There have been cases where sheriffs have successfully sued their board of commissioners because they were holding back finances that the department needed. So that's a fight in and of itself. In the case of any police chief, generally the police chief is appointed and appointed by a mayor or a city council member, a city manager, and confirmed by the city council. In my situation, I was appointed by the city manager, I was confirmed by the city council, and it took a unanimous vote for the city council to fire me. The city manager could recommend firing, and if the city council approved it, it didn't have to be unanimous. I was out. If the city manager did not recommend it, then it took a unanimous vote of the city council to terminate the chief of police. The problem is that within those political relationships, there's friendships and strength and animosities that occur, where what Rashida has set up in her Citizen Oversight Committee has retired judges, attorneys, people from human resources, as well as citizens in the community that can look at police behavior and determine whether or not it's correct, because they have investigators that know police procedures that can say, yes, that was appropriate use of force, or no, it wasn't. And that's the type of structure that needs to be done, because until that happens, chiefs and sheriffs are not going to change the internal culture of the organization unless they're forced to from someone outside.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was hoping that you was going to take us to. Does that kind of fall in line with what you were thinking, Patrick, and what you wanted to hear?
I tell you what, I do have a question for Jerry, and I think I'm sorry that we used you so much, but you have so much information that we don't. Those calls for a civilian review board, do you think those should be governed by policy or law? Because we've had the conversation about policies or laws to provide some guidelines for departments. And have your feelings changed at all about whether they should go be accomplished or be achieved by policy or law?
It must be accomplished by law. You're not going to get it by policy. If you don't have the teeth of the law, it's not going to occur. In fact, in Idaho, there is a transparency law that prevents or that allows chiefs and police heads of agencies to refuse to disclose information under certain circumstances. One is a personnel action, and that's exempt from disclosure, and the other one is it's an ongoing investigation. Well, if I'm an unethical chief and I don't want to disclose anything, I'm going to make it fall under one of those two things. It's going to fall under a personnel action, therefore it cannot be disclosed, or it's going to fall under an ongoing investigation that I never close, and then it can never be disclosed. And that is a way of circumventing the public's rule, and it's wrong and it's unethical, and it needs to be changed by law.
And there lies the problem, really, isn't it, Scott? There lies the problem, Scott, is that no matter, I'm not sure how she was able to get it pushed through where she was, but trying to get it pushed through nationally is where you're going to start, because states, and that's the problem with America, because it's not a thing that's generalized, that because one state does it, the other state has to do it. It's each state was going to have to battle for its own, and it's only if those that are in power agree to allow it to happen is it going to happen, and that's the difficulty in making something law right across the United States of America, is because that's not how you're governed, right?
Yes. I mean, again, I'm not an attorney, but the article that I thought I sent to everybody regarding For example, Patrick had a good question. Has there been legal challenges? And the Oakland recent firing of the chief, her name is Ann Kirkpatrick, and Chief Kirkpatrick was fired by the Coalition for Police Accountability, the CPA. That's Rashida's organization. By the way, they are completely independent of the city government. She got legislation passed, and they are funded by donations and grants. They are not taxpayer funded, the CPA. So that allows that complete independence and lack of, let's say, good old boy closeness that occurs, when police are policing police. And she knew that. Rashida's quite smart, and so is their committee. But there were in the article I just sent out, there were legal challenges. There was a Skelly hearing, and maybe Jerry's familiar with that. I'm not totally familiar with it, but it's basically a Skelly hearing is a law that allows a review of the discipline that might have been imposed on an officer. And in this article, which Rashida just sent me this week, there was a challenge to the whole situation of Ann Kirkpatrick being fired and the discipline that she did not mete out to officers that were involved in, unjustified use of force. She didn't do what the Chief Kirkpatrick didn't follow the, let's say, the guidelines of the Coalition for Police Accountability. Therefore, the CPA fired Miss Kirkpatrick. She sought to blame the investigator instead of herself. She went after the investigator. So you can see the politics, Patrick, back and forth, name get blaming. But at the end of that investigation and the appeal to the investigation, guess what? The police commission, the CPA, the Coalition for Police Accountability, was justified, was upheld, and their firing is going to be sustained by, not overruled. So, and that's, as Jerry would say, that's the kind of legal pressure and protection that something like a CPA, a coalition, and to answer your question, the reason it works is because it is a coalition. Yeah. It's not just friends of the police chief. It's not just people that were appointed by the mayor. It's people that a coalition, as I said before, it's old, young, all types of people, faith-based groups, business organizations, retirees, homeless advocates, and people that are from the industry that have retired, that realize that there are problems within law enforcement. They've stepped forward and gotten on this coalition. So it's hard for the city council of Oakland. Well, they can't overcome this. They would have to get a law passed to outlaw the Coalition for Police Accountability, because it was voted in by the taxpayers. And this is something I haven't mentioned, is the money involved in this. Most in California in particular, and maybe throughout the country, the police department is a huge part of every city budget or every county budget or the state budget, police, law enforcement. And yet there's virtually no oversight. Yet just billions of dollars go into law enforcement with no civilian oversight. So that people haven't mentioned that. We, the taxpayers, are paying for this civilian oversight, but we have no say and no accountability for how the money is spent. It's all given to the secretive organization. And that's what Rashida was able to pierce. But she did it with a coalition, Kervin. She didn't do it on her own. She got a coalition, and that's her protection. She's got the people, the voters, the taxpayers behind her.
Well, at least we've got a model now and something to work on, which is what we actually didn't have on the back end of the show that we did with Liana Perez. And now that's coming off the back of the show that we did last week. We're really going to have to, because we're running out of time, I want to try and move across to the psychological effects of losing a loved one, but without disrespecting our ladies who have been waiting in the wings for almost an hour without being included in the show so far. And it almost looked like we've bullied them out, and we haven't, in all honesty. There was just some stuff that I really wanted to get out, and I wasn't expecting it to take as long as this. It just shows really that we could actually go into this for a whole nother show and still have more meat left in it once you start pulling this thing apart. But can I just quickly go to the ladies and more importantly, Mama Curtsy, and if there was anything that she quickly wanted to round up on that last week's show or on this issue before we move over to psychological effects, or does she just want to go straight into psychological effects?
I think the gentleman covered it pretty well. We can just go straight on over to the psychological effects.
Okay. Well, you see, you gotta take care of Mama. If you don't take care of Mama, you know there's no cooking going on in the kitchen, right? Okay.
Right.
So I know where my bread's buttered on. So yeah, guys, I just want to thank you, especially Jerry and Jerry, Patrick, and Scott for really rounding that up for us and really putting some meat on that bone. I'm really looking forward to looking into how we move forward with this in the future. But the part 2 of this segment was looking at the psychological effects of losing a loved one to law enforcement, which is also part of this community accountability that we're talking about here on Issues Today over the last 2 weeks. And I believe, if I'm correct, that Stephanie Babb has got some stats for us. Either I'm right or I'm wrong. If I'm right, she's going to come in and do it. If I'm wrong, then I've just shot myself in the foot. Come in, Stephanie Babb.
I do not have those stats. I can look them back up because I added some last week. So give me a second to check those out first, okay?
Okay. So in the meantime, let's just move over to Dee Martin. And Dee, can you just give us an insight as to how the psychological effects of losing a loved one to law enforcement has really impacted you, driven you, stumbled, maybe been a stumbling block for you? How has it affected you, and what have you had to do to battle through that to get to where you are?
That's a catch-22 there, because although law enforcement will be in effect for as long as they will be, and that's just it. I've come across situations where I don't do anything to encounter the police. Not that it has to be that type of situation, but you have to pick and choose your battles. And there's a lot of things out there that can cause you to stumble, because that sense of authority and demand that you must adhere to whatever their cause is for stopping you. I don't feel comfortable even being in the vicinity of law enforcement, honestly. My children the same way. So not only did it affect me personally, but it affects them on another standpoint as well. Recently, my oldest son, who was absolutely close to my brother Andre, he has suffered some psychological issues as well, and we're working on that with him. But as far as the trust within law enforcement, that is not the go-to. So anything that happens, it must be settled by someone with the right state of mind. The thing that I've noticed most when I've been pulled over for just random stupid stuff, and their first thing is to shoot out all of these the questions or demanding this or demanding that. I've been pulled over for my license plate light not being on, and we go back to check it, both of us, and it's on, but still I received a ticket for doing such. And at that time I wasn't aware that I received a ticket, but a warning. And being just stopped for random issues, stating, I'm on the telephone when I'm driving, and that's something that I don't do. But initially, they feel as though they have a right to do certain things. And when you state, I don't care how much of your constitutional rights that you admit to, or state to them, they're oblivious to that because they don't uphold the laws in which they try to enforce. So apparently I come off as a smart ass, and so you're treated a certain way. But as far as the psychological changes, you definitely go through it. You just have to, I would say for me, I have to go to what I know. And that's to not get out of character, because we don't need a reason. There's no reason for the things that have happened to happen. And when you put yourself in a certain position and understanding, hey, this guy has this chip because of so and so reason. I don't need to exploit that option. I don't know. He has no idea what I've gone through. I have no idea what he goes through. But at the same point, I don't need to be the one to initiate that trigger for another unnecessary event to happen. It took me a long time, and it's still taking me a long time to get to that place to where I'm getting back to my biblical knowledge as to how to conduct myself in this world, because of the things that are happening. And this can go as far as the law enforcement or whatever the case may be. But I definitely have to use my biblical insight and understanding to be able to maneuver through this place. So I'm getting back to that, which makes it a little easier for me to understand the enemy when it comes. And that can be in the form of whoever. But as far as law enforcement goes, there's no I have no faith in them at all, and no faith at all, because of everything that has transpired. Day to day, you have those good days, you have the bad days, and you have the darkest of all days. And I am pretty sure you guys have maybe all seen that from me. But thank God for the mindset that I'm working through to be able to cope with that. But initially, it is a hard pill to swallow. You never get back to norm. There is no norm. It's just what has happened and how you move forward through this point. I think the different organizations has had an impact on me as well, because as you know, when this a situation has occurred to where you've lost a loved one due to a police-involved shooting, you start to look for answers and start to get vulnerable as to the help that you're looking for. And a lot of the organizations that I've come across here in Sacramento County has not been for the intent or justice for that initial family. It's a usury for certain highlights in the media, one family versus the next, which shooting or which person is more important. So a lot of the issues that I brought to the table and trying to reach out to different organizations, it has not been as effective as me reaching out to Yolanda or saying, hey, can I get some help with this? Can you point me in this direction? And then, I get some input that way. But as far as local support, the organizations, they tend to place one family's situation over the other for publicity purposes. And, I don't think that's right, nor is it fair, but it definitely turns a family member or families against each other when we should actually be uniting to bring cause to the actual issue at hand. So it's a lot of trust issues with law enforcement organizations, having the wrong intent to support or using you as a front to make themselves relevant to what's happening day to day. So that when we talk about, the families uniting and doing this, that, and the third, that's definitely a possibility, but the organizations have to have that the family's best interests at heart in regards to receiving the justice that they need, and not personally any kudos to them initially as a person. So that is kind of, gets me iffy as to who should I talk to, what should I say, what shouldn't I say, how can it be used in this way to get the justice, instead of just say, I'm not just super big on I definitely want to get the story out and get something placed in the forefront for, justice to be received. However, I think a lot of the times when I mention this to different organizations, the wrong questions come up. And that kind of, throws me back a bit. And, well, did he do this or did he do that? It's like, well, I don't see the crime in asking for help. There's no way, shape, and form that I can see a crime in that. So initially, his story, sometimes it throws people off, sometimes it doesn't. I've had individuals interested in helping, but from the standpoint of people that I've touched bases with outside of our roundtable, it hasn't been so helpful. So you're kind of forced to become that investigator on your own, and you're super skeptical about the legal system and how the attorneys, what their interests are, and if they can help or if they're stringing you along. So I've recently had some go around with that. I don't want to speak ill about his character. I think his character is, superb. As far as the help that I received from that specific attorney was almost zero to none. So I think it came from understanding my hurt and persistence in getting this done, and him not wanting to tell me, hey, this is not a battle that I can fight because of the lack of witnesses or the lack of video cam, the lack of, a bunch of information. However, he was under the impression, the same as the rest of us and people who hear the story in regards to Andre, but we were pretty much strung, in my opinion, and no disrespect to him, but strung along through a lengthy period of time. So psychologically, I'm not trusting a lot of individuals in regards to receiving the justice that I think he deserves.
That's great. I'm going to bring in Yolanda if I can, because I want to try and capitalize on that if I can, Dee. Because you see, Dee, Yolanda, I just want you to come in because Dee's very intellectual. She knows the case. She knows her brother's case. She's very strong on her brother's case, and she can represent Andre's case to anybody that she speaks on. I can understand the frustrations that she feels that she comes across when she's coming against other people that are not part of the movement, that are not sympathetic to law enforcement, wrongful killings, etc. But the real crux of what we're trying to get at here is the psychological impact. That's the mental and emotional impact, because Dee can do this off the bat, and you give Dee a stage. We know that Dee can go out there. She can go and bat for Andre. That's her brother. She loves him like cooked food, apple pie, and ice cream, and ain't nothing standing in the way of that. But in the midst of all of that is that emotional turmoil, that daily battle, waking up in the morning and having to trod through that thing all over again, knowing that 90% of the people that you're going to probably come across ain't even interested in listening to your cry, your pain, your hurts, the reason for why you're out there doing what you're doing. Majority of them just wish that you'd just move along and go and talk to someone else. And yet it's everything to you. It's everything to you.
Right.
This is everything to you. Until you get past this, life don't exist.
Right. And people need to understand that families of police murder victims, and let's just call it what it is, it's police murder. They suffer a consistent PTSD. The movie Groundhog's Day.
Yeah.
Bill Murray had to relive the same thing over and over and over again until he tried to figure out a way. He had to try to figure out a way to make the day different so that he could move forward. We don't get that. We get to replay, but we don't get to. There's nothing we can do that's going to change it. The outcome is what it is. Our loved one is gone permanently. And in 99% of the cases, the murderer got a paid vacation and an attaboy. As though our loved ones were just simply a notch to be taken so that they could move up the ranks.
And is that where the emotional roller coaster really starts? Where it starts penetrating?
Absolutely. And I'm going to say it for what it is. It's a mind fuck on a regular basis with no Vaseline.
Yeah.
You don't get a chance to step away from it and say, well, they're in a better place. They know, no, the way they got there was not a better way.
Right.
It was an extreme, violent, callous, selfish thing. And they don't care how they hurt your family. They don't care how the domino effects happen. They don't care that loved ones have heart attacks and die, or have strokes and commit suicide because they can't be with that person anymore. They don't understand how this person is supposed to, because all of us were wrongfully informed as children that police were our friends and they're going to take care of us and they are there to help us. And we have now got this new crop of garbage in a uniform that thinks that no matter who you are, what color you are of no value unless they assign you some. And your value is a bullet or a few, a beating, a drowning, a tasing, suffocation, being hung, being exsanguinated. It's entertainment to them, only until you're dead. And then it's like, well, why are you making a big deal of it anyway? They had no value. You don't know who has value. And it's not your job to take them from us.
That's right.
So, yeah.
I remember, and I asked Dee a while back if she knew Antoinette Houston, because she's got her as a friend on Facebook. Now, I interviewed Antoinette Houston on my show about 6 years ago, not long after her incident, and while she was still trying to raise money for the $60,000 worth of surgery that she had to go through to repair all the muscle damage that was done to her arms, her shoulders, when the police manhandled her and absolutely ripped her arms apart in a car park on a Walmart on her way back from a funeral. And this was a woman who was she was a teacher. She was a dance teacher. She had a dance school. And one of her pupils' father had died. And the woman didn't want to go to the funeral on her own and asked Antoinette to go with her. And I'm going to try and wrap this up as quickly as I can. So Antoinette attended the funeral, which was way across some other states, a good 8-9 hours drive, whatever it was, to go and support this woman at her father's funeral, and then had to drive home, and arriving home early hours of the morning. And I think it was around 2-3 o'clock in the morning when she actually arrived at the Walmart and only wanted to stop for a donut because she just felt like a snack, mid-journey before she got home. The car park being empty, she stopped in the middle of the car park. Cut a long story short, the police have come in there. But Antoinette Houston had her previous fiance was a law enforcement officer. Her father had been in the forces. She had never witnessed, and this is a strong black woman, she had never witnessed racism. She had never witnessed law enforcement racism. She didn't have a handle on it whatsoever. She didn't have a viewpoint on it. She may have spotted it on TV once or twice, but it was something that happened to someone else, somewhere else, and it really had no impact on her whatsoever until that day. And that day was to change her life forever. And when we talk about these psychological impacts that we're referring to here, we're not just talking about a normality, something that people can just skip along and get on with. This is an interjecting issue that will change your mindset, your thinking, your viewpoints, your relationships, your attitude, your mentality, your drive, your purpose, your will, your desire. It will affect every single fiber of anything that drives you to do anything or go anywhere. Simply because once they've killed your loved one, they then recriminalize them and treat you like you're a criminal too. And you don't even have an opportunity to go through your grieving process. Your loved one dies of a heart attack or gets run over by a truck or something. You know what I mean? You mourn, you have the wake, You go to church, you say some prayers, you bury them, you mourn them, it's a loss, you're sad that they've gone, but there was nothing that could have been done to help them because it was a heart attack, or the silly idiot stepped out in the road and didn't look to the left, the vehicle wasn't driving too fast, it was him that made the mistake, so there's nobody to blame. So it's just a case of you get an opportunity to grieve, mourn, and somehow move on and get over it. But this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about your child's on their way to school, or they're on their way to work, or on their way home from work, or on their way to a park or from a park, shooting hoops with their mates, or whatever it is that they're doing. And yes, a small minority of some of these that we're talking about have also been either in the possession of carrying firearms or drugs or whatever else. But I'm not talking about the gangbangers here. Right? Let me just make myself clear. I've never stood here on this show, right, and endorsed gangbanging and supported people that perpetuate crime and want to carry on. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's my belief, honestly, right? People still need to die with dignity. I get that. But I'm not here shouting off the rooftops for those that go out there and live a life of crime, wanting to rob, shoot, rape, murder, and do all of that kind of stuff. These are inevitabilities that they're going to come to a sad end. I'm talking about these hundreds and thousands of cases of innocent individuals who are going about their business, and some of them running for their lives because they're so fearful of what these law enforcement officers might do, and they end up dead. And your life, your world as you know it, is transformed forever from that moment. There is a psychological impact that changes everything that you ever thought, everything that you ever believed, everything that you were ever shown in your life is changed in that moment. And that's the moment I want to get to. What triggered that? What was that defining moment? When did you realize that all your thinking, all your beliefs, all your drive, all your purpose had been flipped? And flipped to what? That's where we want to get to. Patrick. Or whoever that was. Come on, D.
I remember after we were made aware of what happened to Andre. At first, we weren't aware that it was a police-involved shooting because of the lack of information law enforcement provided his father. But I remember a couple days after that same day, but later that day, we were made aware that it was a law enforcement. But I think that the thing that kind of took the turn for the worst for me was not only was he murdered in such a violent way by someone that we also all were familiar with. This is who you call for help. This is who would fix that. When Andre... I felt like Andre they failed him at the hospital. The individual whose home he arrived to, that guy also failed him. Law enforcement. Not only that, but when we had two services for my brother, one out there in Portland, Oregon for the family out that way, and also one in Sacramento. So Andre, his body was so disturbed after the initial murder. When we had the service in Portland, Oregon, he was presentable, fine to be able to, as far as his look, he was okay for us to receive a open casket ceremony for him. But he was transferred to Sacramento via, the plane, and that mortuary did not receive him properly, and they prepared for the service maybe days, 2 to 3 days before the service took place. So my family was not able to say goodbye to Andre. He was actually buried. We actually said goodbye to him on my mother's birthday. So I look at all of the things that initially took place, and I'm like, well, God, my brother was it was bad from the beginning. That whole day up until the day he was laid to rest, we had to get him cremated. It was not an option. We had to do closed casket because all of the issues that transpired with his proper care even after death was very poor quality. So and I'm looking back on different events, and I'm like, this world is full of shitty people. And I know that's not 100% true, but everyone that had something to do with him from that day and it put me in a space. It's like, why am I being kind to people? Why am I giving people the benefit of the doubt? Why am I doing this and that? This world is full of shitty people. And then I come to realize after reading article after story changes, there's a lot of people in this world that support the behaviors that are displayed today within law enforcement, and it's sickening. It's literally sickening. And you watch the media dehumanize your loved one, and then you have a crowd of, the commentary groups that say, hey, thanks for taking out the trash, and he shouldn't have done this, and he shouldn't have done that. And it's like, hey, I don't have a choice but to feel how I feel at this point. So my perception of humanity and its kindness dwindled to about a 2%. And until you start to reach out to other individuals that this happened to, this is not something that I would initially be like, well, hey, this is, even though before this happened to Andre, my family and I were a part of Black Lives Matter that supports other, families and individuals, but never did I ever think that I would be standing in those same streets fighting for my own brother because of what has happened. I never thought that would be me or my family or my loved one, that I would be standing at a corner with a sign for justice for this individual. A lot of those individuals, a lot of them did survive, but a lot of them didn't as well. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would be there for that reason, for that person, especially that one. Now, I don't have a favorite brother. I don't. But that one was dear to me. And never in my wildest dreams could I ever imagine something like that happening to a person so kind and so open and so friendly and so loving and full of life. Even with the lack of it, yeah, he had his issues and things like that. But I tell people all the time, hey, that's my brother. And whether he was a CEO of this business or he was a bum on the street, it made no difference to me. But that was a loved one that you had no right. No human on this world has any right to take away a life that they weren't involved in creating,
right.
Let alone determine whether this person is worthy enough to live. Because I can look at each and every one of us or the people in this world. On any given day, you've done something and you deserved a punishment that you didn't receive. So how dare you take this person's life and not consider anything but you making it home? That was completely it. So that's what turned it for me, understanding that I give people the benefit of the doubt. And 30 years ago, this man was born into this world, and lo and behold, he's the death of my brother 23 years later.
Stay strong. Stay strong.
That's exactly where I was trying to go with this. That's what I wanted from you, D, and it's so powerful in the way that you've just compacted that and shared that, and we honor you, your bravery, your courage, your vulnerability in this moment is what I wanted. That's the psychological effect that this has had on you. That's what I wanted to get across, so that people could understand how it changes someone from who they were and how they were into this doing this, standing on a street corner with a placard, a card, shouting for justice for the one person in your entire life, you'd have never imagined you would have had to be doing that for. Changes your whole perspective.
Never.
Powerful. Thank you for that, Dee. We honor you. We honor you in this moment. Salute you. Thank you very much for sharing that. I just want to continue on. We've still got 25 minutes left. I want to bring in Stephanie Babb if I can, and just very quickly, just trying to understand that psychological impact, what it does to you, how it changes you.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, it changes the way you look at everything. It's like putting on a different shade of glasses that you can never take off. Everything is colored from that moment on. When my brother was shot on Monday evening, my cousin was at his neighbor's house and had heard the gunshot go off. And he called his mom, my aunt, who called me. And we were still trying to find out what was going on. We knew the police were there. And so I had to call my sister and my niece and nephew's mom, my brother's ex-wife. And so for a period of about an hour and a half, we still didn't have anything confirmed. We knew somebody was dead, but we didn't know how, what, where, why, we know how and where. But so in that amount of time, it was my job to go ahead and call my dad's family, my dad and his family. And I had to drive to Alpine to go tell my mom in person. So the whole time I'm doing this, I pull over on the side of the road because we had family members that were friends with police, and they'd hear something and call me, and I'd pull over. And then I had to call my stepdad to get him to make sure my mom didn't answer the phone. I wanted her to hear it from me in person. So like I said, Monday night. So my mom wanted to say goodbye, and I arranged for us to have a viewing of the body, which happened on Thursday, my 46th birthday. Between Monday and Friday, I had to come up with a venue to have a memorial. I had to gather food, flowers. I had to have the cards printed out. I did this by myself, and I went to the mortuary and I put everything together. I had the support of my family, but they weren't able to be here in person. So that Saturday, less than a week, 5 days later, we had a memorial at the Vets Club and there were over 400 people that showed up. And Sunday, the next day, was Easter. So the following week, we had news people there. And see, it's not, if somebody dies, I just recently had a niece get killed in a car wreck. And there's the immediacy, there's the grief, there's the anger, there's the hurt, there's the, how do you move on from here? But with our families, it's public. You keep seeing the name in the newspaper. You see, people want to know what your reaction is. There are people that are haters, on social media and everything else. And so it doesn't go away. And you are left to your own devices to find out the information that you can, because you don't know what happened. And your trust is eroded in our society in the way that things stand. Nothing feels the same. I wasn't the same. I remember for months I'd wake up in the morning so disoriented that I didn't know where I was. So three thoughts just always went through my mind. The first thing is, where was I? Where's my daughter? And Brian's dead. Every morning. Those were the first three thoughts I had every day without fail. And that's what it does to a person, is it colors everything. It colors our world. I see in different colors now. The hues don't look right to me. They weren't like they used to be, and they never will be. You just have to get used to it, I guess, and make sure help what you can, help the people you can, help the other families. That's change laws, speak out, do what you can. But you're not by yourself. This is public. And there's also the blame that comes with it. My brother was in his own house. He was unarmed. He was on the phone with his VA therapist. and who was killed within less than 45 minutes, or just over 45 minutes from the time a well check call was made by his therapist and the police showed up. So, people are like, oh, well, if he's within the vicinity, if he got shot by a cop, he must have done something wrong. And I believe wholeheartedly that is exactly why we lost our case that we just went through, is nobody can understand or wrap their head around the fact that that gun had been placed there, even with the police admitting that they had placed the gun in that position to take an evidence photo. My brother laid dead in his doorway for 6 hours, and they didn't cover him. They didn't do anything. And the one bullet that was fired that day, they didn't even look for it. My sister found it in the wall the next day. Those are the memories. My sister is a nurse. She works at the VA now. And you know what she got to do? She got to go to my brother's house, and he has a little dog, and she got to clean up all his little paw prints, and he'd ran through the blood. That's what my sister got to do, and clean up the house, because my brother's dog was looking for him. Had been traumatized, and he had ran through the blood and put paw prints. So those are the things that people don't understand, that those things are never going to go away. Getting called from the mortuary asking to bring a hat down so they could put it on his head before the viewing because he had a bullet hole and they needed to cover it. Those are the things that never go away.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And you really put that across so beautifully. Yolanda, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that as far as the psychological impact that one goes through.
Yeah. There is another side that goes along with what Dee and Stephanie have told you, is the fact that you're always on defense of your loved one. There's never a person that walks up to you and says, that wasn't right. Well, I'm not gonna lie and say that. There are several people that'll come up to you and say that wasn't right. I don't buy the story. It doesn't make sense. But then you have that slew of knothead idiots that shouldn't even inhale, let alone be allowed to walk across this earth. Because the first thing that comes out their mouth is, well, whatever they did, they did. That's why they got what they got. My daughter, of course, everybody knows, was just out celebrating her upcoming birthday. She was invited to the police officer's home. She didn't know him. She didn't know him from Adam. But after her death, they were saying, well, what did she do? Did it sound like she did anything? She was shot in the chest. What did she do? She died. She's never coming back. She is forever 24 years old, 364 days. That's what she did. And they don't understand that not only do you victimize the victim, you victimize the family right then and there, because now we have to be on the defense no matter what mindset we're in. And we also have to be mindful, because we have to be politically correct. I can't go upside somebody's head like I really feel like doing when they ask me that dumbass question. I have to tell them, no, look at the facts. This is what happened. My child is not like that. Just to have people doubt whether or not I know what my child is like. Where my neighbors have told people over and over again, reporters and anybody else that came by, her kids hung out with her. Not saying that I'm that party mom. I'm sitting up there drinking and smoking with my kids. I never did. First time I ever had a drink with my kids was at my mother's wake 2 years before Daisha died. And guess what? All my kids, except for my baby boy, was present and grown. That's the first time ever in life that I took a drink with my children.
Wow.
But they want us to always be on the defense. We're always fighting. And that shit is tiresome. It wears you out. Because yes, just like Stephanie, I get up every morning and I say, Audacia's not coming through that door. I'm not going to hear her laugh. I'm not going to be able to give her a hug. And guess what? That was my daily routine. Yeah. I tell all my kids I love them. I give them all a hug. My grandkids the same way. Hell, even my dog comes up and gives me a hug every morning. So don't tell me what I know about my life, other than I can tell you it's forever, ever changed.
You know, thank you for sharing that again, Yolanda. We've just had some real great insight to what the psychological effect and impact has on an individual that continues to live this long after the end results for some. I just want to bring in Jerry Summers, if I can, please, as a former chief of police, listening to the heartfelt pain of, you know, and I'm not talking about your fellow Roundtable members now. I just want you to think about them as mothers, family members, siblings of someone that they've lost. You know, hearing that pain, what is it about law enforcement as a whole, the institute that is, that they can put a blanket over this psychological impact and almost pretend like it doesn't exist?
Well, first of all, my condolences to everybody who's lost a child at the hands of law enforcement. I am deeply impacted by that. Law enforcement goes into a mode when something like this happens, which I'm not defending. I just want to explain. Yeah. I believe it's wrong. But what happens is the first thing that law enforcement, when there's an officer involved, critical incident or shooting or murder, whatever we want to call it, their first thought is liability and protection of the organization itself. So the first thing they tend to do is they tend to victimize the family over on behalf.
In other words, how do we make this not our fault?
Right. How do we get the general public on our side? And there is a strategy behind that, and that is if there's any criminal background in that individual, the first thing we do is say, well, he was known to us, or he had a criminal history. And it may be something stupid, like he received a petty theft charge when he was 12 years old and acquitted from it. But the comment's going to be, he was known to law enforcement, he had a history. And that further victimizes what every one of these panel members have said, that the family gets victimized immediately. And then there is the public's refusal to believe law enforcement will do something wrong. And they'll say, well, if law enforcement went to a trigger and shot this individual, there had to have been a reason for it. Our society does not want to believe that we have a corrupt law enforcement profession. And I'm going to be very clear, we do. There are a lot of very good officers out there that wouldn't do such a thing, but there are officers there that look for promotion because they were involved in critical incidences. I mean, in my own organization, I had an officer one time say he wanted to be the first one on the block with a confirmed kill. He didn't stay with the organization, and I wasn't the chief at the time, but that's kind of the mentality. So when a critical incident occurs, the families are further victimized. They're victimized by the death of their loved one, but then they're further victimized by the reaction of what the law enforcement and the prosecutorial staff puts out, and then how the media treats it. And every one of these panel members who have lost a loved one, who have sat here and told you how you've got idiots out there saying, well, if he got shot by cops, he deserved it or she deserved it. That's not necessarily true. Yeah. And I'm sitting here in tears listening to the pain and the problems. I mean, I lost a loved one not to law enforcement, but I had a child die in an automobile accident. And I understand the struggles of a lost loved one. I can never understand the struggles of a lost loved one due to the hands of people that are sworn to protect the general public. I can't imagine that grief. And for that, I just am deeply affected and apologetic on behalf of a professional involved with for almost 20 years.
Is there such a thing as desensitizing law enforcement officers so that they don't feel anything towards this?
Yes.
Is that kind of mentality of they're still the other guys?
There is a them versus us mentality, which is something that's got to change. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about families that get destroyed. We're talking about loved ones. There's a callousness that occurs to law enforcement officers and law enforcement organizations by virtue of what they see day to day. I mean, we see people at their absolute worst, in the absolute worst circumstances. That doesn't mean they're bad people. They're just in a bad situation. And law enforcement tends to switch, and the mentality tends to switch that there's the scumbags and then there's law enforcement. Everybody who's not in law enforcement is considered a scumbag. And that's an extreme. There are some that do that. Others do not. But there is definitely a desensitization that goes on by virtue of the fact that you're dealing with life-threatening situations every day, or you're seeing suicides or homicides or something. You see that on a day-to-day basis. And in order for your own protection, you start to put things in a box and you categorize situations that without mental health help on a law enforcement standpoint, eventually it will come back and haunt you.
Powerful, absolutely powerful and heartfelt, Jerry. I really feel your sincerity and your genuine, grief, so to speak, at hearing the pain that we've just heard from Stephanie, Yolanda, and Dee in particular. I want to shift across. We really got about 8 minutes left, and I still feel like we've got so much left to cover. I just want to shift across to Scott if I can. In listening to what we've just heard so far, bearing in mind we started talking last week about community accountability and these organizations like Nicole, etc. And then when you look at this psychological impact that it's had on just 3 of the people that we've spoken to so far. We've not even heard from you and Patrick yet, or Therese. When we start talking about these coalitions that need to be set up, is it not something that needs to be set up in the heart of the infrastructure of the entire law enforcement policies and procedures that can then be meted out to every law enforcement agency across the country? Because until we start having officers that has a heart like Jerry, that can see through all the crap and understand that wrong is wrong, and we need to challenge that. Bearing in mind, when we were interviewing, when we had Maria Kafinko on here, and don't forget, we've had her on here 3 times now, and she was on about the way that those officers were in court and how they had to get pulled up by the judge, etc., and certain things, and the way we were hearing how they were acting in and around the courtroom, like somebody's life just didn't even matter. They'd taken it, they've been sued for it, somebody else is paying for it, and they're still acting as if, sure, these regulatory bodies, these coalitions, for example, would be able to scrutinize that behavior and charge them for it, right?
I would hope so. I would hope so. That's why people like us as painful. I mean, it's physically painful. I'm listening to everyone, and my chest is actually tightening up because it just takes my breath away when I hear these comments, and I feel the same way. And every morning, it's my son's in all my conversations. It's just everything in my life dates back to the before he was killed and the day after he was killed. That's how our conversations are, Kervin. It's always, oh yes, we went there on vacation before Tyler was killed, and oh yes, we had that, we had that visitor after Tyler was killed, or we bought this or that, and everything revolves around the day he was killed.
That becomes the timestamp.
That becomes the day you all remember, is the day your son or daughter or brother, sis, whatever, was killed. And then all of the vilification and the derogatory and the haters and the lying and the covering their tails that the cops do. I understand it. Like Jerry says, I understand it. He's not justifying it. I'm not justifying it. I mean, these guys and gals, they have to lie. It's just part of the system. They're protecting their jobs. They're protecting their pensions. They're protecting their fellow officers. And it's wrong, but that's what they do. And that's why this show is important, and we impassioned, suffering families have just got to keep finding that strength to bring civilian, our story and our involvement into these citizen groups to go after the people that can affect change. And that will be the leaders of law enforcement, the chiefs, and get the sheriffs voted out of office. And it needs people like us who have powerful stories to tell. It doesn't make it any easier, but that's my point of view.
Wow. Well, look, we're just about out of time once again, and you guys have done an absolutely amazing job. I can't thank you enough for your openness, your frankness, the vulnerabilities that were shared here today. D. Martin, Stephanie Babb, you were absolutely awesome. Jerry Summers, you are a legend, without a doubt. In fact, Scott, Patrick, Yolanda, you all were absolutely humongous on today's show. And I know that, as this show is recorded and left on record on YouTube, this is going to be a show that will be revisited time and time again by many people around the world, because I think there was just so much given here today in this show. I'm moved. I'm absolutely moved, and I'm in awe of everything that you guys have shared here today. Next week we've got Trina Tip Miller Kelly. She's on the show. Her son Treshawn was also killed after a traffic stop. Maybe we should get Diana Perez to come and bring in a traffic stop. I shouldn't have said that. It's not even funny. But sorry, before we go, Yolanda has a question. Yolanda.
Kervin, what's the impact on you? Seeing as you work so closely with us and you have intimate knowledge of our cases and whatnot, what's the impact on somebody looking at it from the outside?
That's a great question, Yolanda. I'm driven by you. I'm driven by you all. I first went into this 7 years ago, whenever it was, not knowing where it was going to lead me to. And now I feel like I'm a committed activist on your cause, for your cause. I'm part of your family. I'm part of your story. I'm part of your history. I'm part of your present, and I'm part of your future. I'm in it with you. And believe you me, through every painstaking sentence that was spoken from your mouths today, my heart was beating, my eyes were welling up, and I shared your pain and your hurt. I shared it. I'm walking this with you, even though I'm way across the pond And it may look like I'm hundreds and thousands of miles away, but I'm not, my friends. I'm right there with you, walking it with you, feeling it with you, sharing it with you, and giving it the platform that it deserves, it needs, so that everybody else can hear your stories. You are truly remarkable individuals, mighty women and men of valor, strength, and honor. And it's an absolute privilege for me to be able to share my time with you all on a weekly basis, doing what we do here on Issues Today. I'm honored. Without a doubt, I'm honored. Speechless at times, speechless, but I'm honored. And I wouldn't have it any other way. You know? You're my family. That's how I feel. I feel like you're my family. Every single one of you are my family.
And we feel that way about you too, boss.
Well,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Love you.
Well,
if it weren't for you, I don't know. No one out there would hear this.
Oh my
Thank
gosh,
you.
they're hearing it now. Every single one of you, from Jerry right down to D, from the oldest to the youngest, from the brightest to the every single one of you, right, have been handpicked for a time such as this. God, our Creator, our Father in heaven, has called us for a time such as this. And believe you me, if it's not our will, if it be His will, if it be His will, if it be His
It's
will.
our will.
Kervin, may I add one parting comment to law enforcement?
Yeah.
And that is, if for any law enforcement officers or individuals who have law enforcement officers in their families, if I could make one statement, regardless of the incident that occurs, whether you believe you're justified or not, you're dealing with a human being and you're dealing with someone's loved one. Treat them with dignity and respect. And let's let the circumstances determine whether or not you are absolutely wrong and in need of punishment or if you were justified. But remember, the person that is now deceased is a loved one of many, many people.
Yeah.
Treat them with honor and respect and don't degrade that individual. And that will go a long way. It won't replace the person, but quit vilifying and victimizing the ones left behind.
And that's from the mouth of a former chief of police, Jerry Summers, our dear friend, beloved in every respect. Thank you very much. We have run out of time. We look forward to seeing you all again next Saturday night, same time, same place for another Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julien. I'm out of here.